Hey everybody, we're going to be continuing our Team Comp Guide series with the Guides to Royal Comp in patch 61.1. We did get some changes that actually make this comp a little bit more valuable, so I think it's a good time to talk about it. And we're going to talk about, the different strengths and weaknesses, the reasons why you might get into it, and just any details involved in playing it. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe, and there'll be a text version that you're looking at is going to be in the description. So check that out if you want to read a little more in detail or you just prefer text-based content. Firstly, let's talk about what is a Royals comp and why you might play it. Here we're talking about comps that specifically have synergies with princes and princesses as a tribe. There's going to be a lot of overlap with, good alignment because most of the relevant princes and princesses are good, and often in the end game you're going to want to transition into a good boy related comp because the scaling of princes and princesses doesn't always scale super well into the late game, so you might need a good boy with like a magic sword to give you that boost if you want to be playing this, after everybody's reached level 6. And as to why you might play Royal Comp, I think there's three main reasons, those being Prince Arthur, Court Wizard, and the new hero Miri Lion, King Lion. So first of all, Prince Arthur is a 3/3 for 3 that upgrades into a 6/6, and it says at the start of each brawl, give your upgraded princes and princesses +2/+2 on upgraded or +4/+4 upgraded permanently. So note that this buff only applies to upgraded princes and princesses. That means that it's going to be very important to upgrade your princes and princesses, otherwise this does nothing. This also does upgrade itself. If you get an upgraded version of this, it will become a 10/10 and a 14/14. It gets very big. It's a common knighthood target with Gwen now that they made the change, moving this down. It used to be a 4 cost, now it's a 3 cost. The Prince Arthur is going to be a primary scaler in these comps. You're going to probably want to have one of these, otherwise you're probably not going to be playing this comp. And, if you get it upgraded, that's all the better, especially since it also upgrades it also buffs itself if it's upgraded. It has no effect on itself if it's not upgraded. And the primary weakness of the Prince Arthur, scaling, ability is that it only works on upgraded princes and princesses. And a lot of the princes and princesses upgrade not based on buying 3 of them, but on quests. And those quests require them to survive damage with Nutcracker, deal damage with Hercules, or just slay with Brave Princess and Lancelot, which means that the Prince Arthur doesn't help you get the upgrades, it just gives you a big buff once they are upgraded. So that can be an issue. If you're not able to get them upgraded, the Prince Arthur is sort of just going to buff itself or nothing at all. Secondly, we have Court Wizard. Court Wizard says when one of your princes or princesses is attacked and killed, it makes a bonus attack. So that means that anytime your opponents attack into your princes and princesses, if they die, this gets an attack no matter where it is in the normal attack rotation, and it will also get its normal attack. So this can throw out a lot of extra damage, and it can do it as a ranged character. Ranged characters are already very strong. This is a ranged character that gets bonus attacks, which can be incredibly strong. Obviously, the issue with this card is that it's only a 4/2, which means that these attacks it's throwing out aren't particularly impactful, and it's not a prince or princess, so it doesn't scale with the normal prince and princess scaling like Prince Arthur or even the King Lion that we're about to talk about. It is a mage. It can get scaling based on Aeon. It can get scaling based on your hero power. If you have like a Merlin that can toss some buffs on it, that's random chance though, or Charon if you can get it to die first, although that sort of requires it to be pretty far out of its normal attack, normal positioning. And you might just have to rely on spells to buff it, or something like we talked about with a good boy. If you have a good boy up front and it buffs this, then all those attacks you get from the princes and princesses dying is going to be especially impactful. Finally, we have the new hero, which I think a lot of people are excited about. It's Miri King Lion. It says your princes and princesses get +2/+2 for every prince and princess you've upgraded. So you'll just get stacks every time you upgrade a prince or princess, and then those princes and princesses, as well as any future ones you buy, get +2/+2. This can be a huge buff. The Sky Castle is a prince and princess specific treasure. It's a level 4, and it gives +4/+4 to all princes and princesses. If you have 2 stacks on this, it does the same thing as a level 4 treasure, which I think is just huge. Hugely impactful. And that means that getting upgraded princes and princesses early on is going to be a priority. Cinderella, fortunately, is very easy to find early and, can be upgraded with just a little bit of effort. It doesn't require you to have anything specific happen in combat, so you're in control of it, provided you get spell rolls that cooperate, but it's difficult early on to not get spell rolls that allow you to upgrade Cinderella. You just might have to throw off your curve. So if you want to make that investment, you will be able to get that reliably. Brave Princess is a little bit tougher. She requires a sleigh, which is maybe a little harder to set up, but you can usually get that eventually. And then Romeo and Juliet are going to be some of the other 3s and 4s. You just have to buy 3 copies of them along with Prince Arthur. So if you can get those, you can get some stacks of this. I've never seen it get higher than like 5 or 6 stacks, but plus 12 is a huge bonus to all your characters. You do have to go princes and princesses for this to be useful at all, and it doesn't buff your court wizard. But this is a very strong push into royals. If you're picking this character, I think you're doing it with the assumption that you're going to maybe not force, but definitely heavily prioritize princes and princesses, at least in the early and mid games. Next, let's talk about the core princes and princesses. The quest units, Cinderella, Brave Princess, Nutcracker, Lancelot, and Hercules, are going to be your main characters that you focus on. These are the ones that upgrade not with triples, but with the individual quests. Lancelot needs to get 25 attack or health. Brave Princess needs to slay. Nutcracker needs to 5 damage. It's actually been buffed to 4 times, not 5. And Hercules needs to deal 100 damage. So a lot of these are based on getting in combat. And Cinderella is casting 4 spells, which, you can do outside of combat. A lot of these are based on getting in combat or just getting buffs. If you can get Lancelot to slay, you have to slay 9 times, which is a lot. Or you can just apply some buffs to him. It even works on like support buffs. It doesn't have to be a permanent buff. So if you just put him in front of a couple Sporkos, that gets you part of the way there, and then you see a couple slays, or you cast a spell on him, or maybe you're a fairy godmother that gives health buffs. Although note it's current health, not overall health. So if he takes damage, that makes it a little tougher. Brave Princess is just a standard slay. Putting in the first slot, putting a Mim behind it is going to be how you get there. Nutcracker just needs to survive damage. Something like a Meteors can help. Falling Stars can help. But the goal is just to be able to get these upgraded very quickly. When you do upgrade them, they are pretty effective combat units for their cost. You do get the treasure of their level. So you get a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or even a 6 in the case of Hercules. So these are going to be sort of your bread and butter units. Once you buy one, you will not see any other ones, so you can only get one of each of these. But it is usually, if you're going princes and princesses, you're going to be looking for these. Shorewood Sure Shot is a 2-cost ranged unit. So you're going to get it before you get most of the other prince and princess payoffs, unless, of course, you're in the King Lion hero. But getting the Sure Shot early is going to be something that sometimes leads you into princes and princesses. If you get an upgraded Sure Shot, then if you see a Prince Arthur, it's usually worth buying because getting the +2/+2 buff on a ranged unit is very powerful. Sure Shot is also very good with the Court Wizard because it always attacks from ranged. It doesn't die on its attack, meaning that the Court Wizard will almost always trigger with the Sure Shot because if it's up front, because it's required to be attacked by your opponent for it to die. And finally, we have Romeo and Juliet. Basically, Juliet's just a vanilla 7/7. Romeo is a 5/3 with the last breath. If Juliet is dead, summon her and give her +7/+7 this Brawl. That's not a permanent buff, but it does make her come back as a 14/14 base, and any buffs you apply to Juliet will be applied when she comes back. So these do not have a quest, so you will just need to buy 3 of them to get them upgraded. It's often better to upgrade Juliet and let her get the buffs from Arthur, but just have a pair of Romeos, because she will come back twice. So, it's fine to upgrade Romeo. It makes her come back +14/+14, which is a significant buff. But if you do have a very strong Juliet, it's often fine just to keep 2 Romeos. So that is something to think about. So these can be your bread and butter units. They make up the core of the royal comp. One thing to note is there's not a lot of characters here that buff other characters. That's really just the Prince Arthur. So if you're in a fight, you're just going to have the stats available to you in that fight. You don't have a lot of tricks. You do have one ranged unit. You do have the Romeo that comes back. but mostly these characters, just when the fight starts, they are what they are. If they can attack and kill your opponents, they do that. If not, you're going to lose the fight most of the time. Just some quick odds and ends. The Sky Castle is the 4 cost that gives the Prince and Princesses +4/+4. It's pretty powerful in the mid-early game. One thing that's really useful for is getting those quests finished. It helps with the Brave Princess, Nutcracker, Lancelot, and Hercules a little bit. But it's nothing special. If you already have the upgrades, the Prince Arthur's giving +4/+4 return, so that +4/+4 doesn't seem too significant. But, it is something related to Princes and Princesses. Good to be on the lookout for it. And Nutcracker gives you a 4-drop. Sometimes you'll see this. It's worth picking up a good amount of the time. Sting gives your first character +10 attack. That's not anything specific to Princes and Princesses, but it is very good with those sleighs and with the Hercules, so something to look out for. It's also good with the ranged units. If you put a sure shot first, Sting's very good. Sting's very good in a lot of comps because it does help trigger sleighs and a couple other abilities. So, be on the lookout for that. It's not going to pull you into Princes and Princesses, but it is something that's helpful if you end up going into it. Then we just want to talk about the other royals. You have Adventurer, you have Sleeping Princess, you have Princess White, who's mostly a dwarf character, and also evil, so she really doesn't have a lot of cross synergies at all. And then Princess Peep, who is a princess herself but summons animals, so she actually plays more into the animal comps a lot of the time. Those characters are not particularly relevant to this comp. You will play them if you get them upgraded and they start growing, but they're not going to be something you look out for because they don't upgrade with the quests, so they don't upgrade super easily. And they also don't have any relevant text. Adventure is very good just to get the XP on, so there's going to be a lot of competition for her. If you can grab one of her, if you grab her, if you grab an upgraded version of her, you might just play her for the XP, but you're not generally going to play her specifically because she's a princess. However, you might end up, moving into that because you get an upgraded adventure, you have another upgraded princess or prince, and then you find a Prince Arthur. Maybe that's how the comp comes together. And then finally, just Queen's Grace is a 2-cost spell that gives a prince or princess +7/+7 plus this brawl. Obviously, +7/+7 is pretty big in the early game, so it can swing a fight. The biggest impact of this is going to be trying to get that extra slay on the Brave Princess, or getting the Lancelot over the 25/25 mark, or Nutcracker, letting it survive damage for a fight to get that final tick on it. So keep an eye out for that. Late game, there's going to be better spells. 7/7 isn't nearly as good as a Pig or more for a Fog or a Disintegrate or just really anything else in the late game, but it's a nice early and mid-game spell to be on the lookout for. Finally, let's talk about the strengths and weaknesses really quickly. Prince Arthur provides reliable scaling, and it doesn't really depend on combat going a certain way. You don't need to get particular sleighs in that combat. You don't need certain things to die in a certain order. At the beginning of the fight, you get your scaling, and that's it. So it can be really reliable scaling, provided that you get your upgrades. Secondly, the quest characters are nice to upgrade because you don't need to buy 3 of them, so it's easier on your gold. You don't have to go searching for things, and you get treasures pretty early off them. Obviously, that can go the other way as well, but if you're sort of on parity with most opponents, you will upgrade them in a reasonable time frame, and you have gold flexibility because you only need to buy 1 copy of them. Thirdly, the scaling provides both attack and health. This is different than something like an Ashwood, which only gives the attack. This means that your characters generally trade well and aren't super vulnerable to spells that do damage. There's some things that upgrade only their attack, which means they can get picked off by just, stray small characters, especially spawners, that, just get a little bit of attack and can trade into them. Because your characters are going to be pretty beefy as well as have decent attack, they trade pretty well in most cases. And after the quest is complete, your positioning is pretty flexible. You might want to Court Mage in back, you might want to Romeo in back, you might want the Shorewood up front, maybe you want the Lancelot to be able to slay, but it doesn't need to once it triggers. So you're going to have a lot of flexibility in terms of your positioning, and that's good if you need to accommodate other units. And finally, combat is stat-based, so RNG isn't going to be a huge factor. You're not going to be relying on attacking specific things most of the time. Obviously, there are situations where certain value trades are going to be important, but you're not playing something like a Medusa, which you're going to need to attack a certain enemy unit. Basically, if you have more stats than your opponent, you'll generally win. If not, you'll generally lose. but in general, you don't need super specific attacks because all of your things are going to be of similar size, so they're going to trade in a certain way most of the time. And if if those trades are good for you, that's going to be very good. And if they're not, it won't be, but it's not going to be super RNG based like some comps where they have units of just wildly different sizes, or they need their characters to attack in a specific way to get max value, or they're very vulnerable to certain characters being sniped by a spell. You don't need like a Bastien to be surviving in the back for your baby bears to get value off. Once the fight starts, you have your stats, you're ready to rumble, and there you are. Of course, there's some weaknesses. The scaling requires upgrades. If you don't get upgrades, you don't get the scaling, and you sort of just sit there dead in the water. So don't go into this comp if you're not able to upgrade the characters. Don't buy Brave Princesses if you're behind. Don't buy Prince Arthur if you don't have other characters that are already upgraded. Things along those lines. Again, and then similarly, the quests require you to be able to slay or survive damage, so if you fall behind, you're not going to be able to catch up. And, once you're behind, these characters just aren't very good. If you can't survive damage, you just never survive damage. If you can't slay, you'll just never slay. It's not likely to change for the better in the future. Thirdly, you're mostly a pile of stats. If your opponent has bigger units, if they just have dwarfs with a couple lordies, and you just, if you have 70 70s, they have 100 100s, you'll lose every fight, unless you have a really good court wizard, or a pair of them or something. So, you don't have a lot of tricks, you don't have a lot of things to break parity. You could get Romeo and Juliet to give you a spawn that breaks, sort of the 1-for-1 trading, but in general, you just need your characters to be bigger than their characters to win. This comp also doesn't have a lot of helpful late game units. There's Hercules at level 6, but there's nothing else. Your most sort of impactful unit comes at level 3 with Prince Arthur and 4 with Court Wizard. So after that, your opponents sometimes just keep getting better units, and you just hope that your existing units are scaling. But that means your buy phases are pretty uneventful, so you're just going to focus on spells, or you're going to be trying to, just get all your existing units upgraded, or you're trying to figure out how to get a specific treasure by upgrading other units. But it means that the longer the game goes on, the worse your chances get in most cases. And this is very related. These fall off in the late game. Getting 4-4 is great every turn, but eventually your opponent just has bigger units. If they get like an Ashwood with a round table, if they get a couple Lordies for those dwarfs, they'll just outscale you. You're never going to be past, maybe 100 in terms of these scalings. And sometimes the enemy's just going to come to the table with something much bigger. Often, what that means is you're going to need to get a good boy, because most of these characters are good, and something like a magic sword, or just being able to buff the good boy, and that means that these characters will be able to, fight, and the court wizard will be able to, get some bonus attacks, which makes it very good with the good boy. Good boy comp is something that's related to this, and can sometimes transition from a royal comp, but is sort of a different comp, so we can talk about it in a different video. But keep an eye out for good boys in the late game. Try to figure out if that's something you need to go for or not. Relatedly, I'm talking about a lot of things being related. The comp ends up buffing your existing units, and it buffs them over time, which means it is very difficult to switch out your units. If you have something like a Bastien and you have a Princess Peep, you can play that for a while. But then, and that will get the buff from the Bastien when they spawn, and that can work in combat, whatever. As you get later, you see a big angry pigs, or 3 angry pigs, and you switch into that, and that's a defined upgrade. But with princes and princesses, if you have a 50-50 Cinderella, and you see a 20-20 Hercules, it doesn't really feel like an upgrade. And it's going to take a lot of time, even when the Hercules gets upgraded, it only becomes a 40-40. It's going to be hard to replace the stats that you're trading out. So unless you get a good boy specifically, or get some court wizards, something along those lines, you're not going to have a lot of things that improve in the late game shops. So that's going to be something that you grapple with in a lot of these games. Finally, we just have some sample games. Take a look at these if you want to see how these play. I think they provide a pretty good indication of what goes right in these comps, and also what the challenges are. Please remember to like and subscribe. I hope you like these guides. I know they're not for everybody, but I hope the people who do watch them get some useful information on them. Thank you everybody for watching. Hope you have a good one.